Hey watercolor wizards, Hajra here. Today we'll be working on some ink scrub J journal pieces. Thanks for parking your brushes here and let the epic art adventures begin. Now remember, if you're a $7 patron, then you'll get all my new longer 1 hour plus private YouTube videos, free passes to my 6 previous Skillshare videos, along with many other info-dense deconstructed art and Q&A posts, video notes, and sketch downloads. So I've been recently offered to also teach at the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History. And my first class is going to be an ink journaling project featuring the beautiful and super intelligent California scrub jay. And I believe this class is slotted for August 15. I chose the California scrub jay because it's a native California species, and I have daily California scrub jay visitors outside my cottage, and I find them super fascinating. So I asked the Museum of Natural History, and in their case, they don't mind me sharing my class project as an info-dense post on Patreon or as a public YouTube video. So here it is. And you can check out the public post with all my lecture notes and sketch downloads on Patreon. I really hope patrons and viewers will join me in sketching this amazing bird in ink. And usually detailed video notes and also sketches are separate private posts for $7 patrons, but this scrub jay project is going to be fully public, so the Museum of Natural History class students have easy access to my lecture notes and sketches before and after the class. So enjoy! For this project I used an HB graphite pencil for sketching, a soft polymer eraser for corrections, and I also have my Zig Rider markers here, and they are dual tip, waterproof, and light fast, and they have a 0.5mm tip as well as a 1.2mm thicker tip for fill areas. I also have my white gel pen for highlights and corrections, and I've also got my Elegant Rider black marker, and this one is not light fast or archival, but because it's not waterproof, it actually gives really cool runny water-soluble ink effects. And if you're traveling, you can use your Pentel water brush or a size 1 Da Vinci round nylon brush that I like to travel with, a filbert, and I think this is only like 1/3 of an inch and useful for blending and such. I had Elijah cut it down for me so that it's easy for me to travel with. And you can also have a travel water cup. I recently acquired a collapsible silicone water cup that's going to be great for traveling. And it was suggested by one of the viewers on YouTube as something that could fit inside my travel easel drawer. You also want a cloth towel, and you might want a little bit of masking tape to fix your art in place while you're painting. I'll be using loose cardstock for this project, Bristol vellum like I'm using today, or mixed media paper from Strathmore. But you can also bring your watercolor journal along if you have one from Moleskine or Pentalic. You can check out my inking techniques video and the inking techniques sheet that I have that shows all of these, and that's also going to be publicly available on Patreon for you to look at. And we're also going to be using Runny water-soluble ink effects like I've used in past videos. So I'm also sharing my sketches on Patreon, and you can trace and transfer my sketches, or you can freehand draw them. For this or any project, freehand drawing can be accomplished by spotting and blocking out large geometric shapes to create a general bird form before you go to fine-tune. Or you can do a scribble doodle stroke that is a finding and building and assessing of a bird form or any other form more randomly until you like what you see. You can also use a ruler or a proportional divider to measure key points for speed, and I've explained this in other drawing videos, and there's links for details on how to use a proportional divider if you want to do that. And once you have those key points there using your ruler or proportional divider, then you can move on to your freehand drawing faster using scribbling or geometric shape building as I discussed to complete your sketch freehand. And of course you can also trace and transfer my freehand drawing if you don't want to do your own freehand drawing. So I've provided a full-size sketch of the pose that I felt like showed the most blue of the scrub jay, and I also did a close-up sketch so we can really study his head. So those are all there, and I also have a final sketch of a nest and eggs to complete my scrub jay journaling class. And remember, you can just drag and drop or right-click to save these sketches. And these are original art, so they're just for student personal practice only. Don't repost these or sell them. And you also shouldn't be selling or entering into any contest art that's based off of somebody else's original sketches. And that's a general rule for art workshops and classes everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to start with this sketch. I did freehand draw and really detail it to make it cleaner, so you can go ahead and do that. For me, my inking lines require some warming up. There's my vectors. And they're also parallel lines, curving vectors, contour lines, and have some hatches, cross hatches, pointillism, wavy lines, scribbles, hair type vectors, which is lift off at the end so it tapers. We're also going to do some water-soluble effects. I knew about doing this with markers for many years, but only recently found out from Mark Campbell that gel pens are also water-soluble. once you put them down, so you don't have to get the elegant writer. You can also use a gel pen, but basically it means that if you add some water to it, it'll give you some lovely runny effects like that. And if you do that over a waterproof marker, it doesn't. So use both of these in conjunction with each other and you can get some cool runny watercolor-like effects. And you can also use your waterproof line for lines that you don't want to budge, like, you know, a detailed eye area or whatnot. So I actually like to do my illustration in just the waterproof line first and then come back and add the gel pen as needed. And I'm just not pushing the marker down full strength, and I'm using little tapering feathery strokes because the bird's got feather. So instead of doing a really hard line the whole time, if you just have little tiny lines like that, and lots of other subjects, that may not look good. I like to have a tidy, very controlled and confident ink line, but for something that has feathers, that feathery sort of thinking line actually works. It won't work for every subject, but for a bird it works really well. For other subjects I tend to have confident, solid single lines. As for other stuff, hopefully we can get in a little bit of textural effects. We're going to be working mostly dry brush with the ink applied full strength using the marker. A bit of wet and gradient effects when we're wetting some of the water-soluble marker down. This is going to be mostly subtractive painting, going from light to dark in values, typically how ink works on white paper if you have a darker color. So I'm going to be retaining some of my highlights through traditional white of the paper, but also I'm going to be adding some of my highlights last using white gouache and the gel pen as needed. And make sure you make use of value contrast within your ink piece. I love the saying, art is like life. If you get your values right, everything else is easy. So you've gotten rid of most of the painting, and then you just really get to enjoy the drawing part and putting in your values. And I've talked numerous times in the past about grisaille, which is a separate value underpainting. Doing this stuff in ink is actually really great practice to check your values and just focus on black and white, and that's what grisaille helps you do for your painting when you eventually do painting. So especially when you do the water-soluble ink, it really just does turn into a grisaille because you're going to end up having a gradient of values and not just black and white paper, because you're going to have some grays there. Finished all of this off doing mostly contour lines and outlines. Notice how I also have some broken lines here because we're not using any color. There's no way to designate that something has a softer finish or is fading unless you have like a little bit of a broken line. Okay, so I've got these little cut pieces of wax paper, but basically it's a disposable palette. So there's going to be a side of this that's less waxy. I want to use a side that's more waxy. Put some of my ink, find the darkest areas of this bird and just throw some gray in. Put some of that, and then I'm going to come back after that and actually do some water-soluble effects, but I just want to clarify some of these values for myself, where they are, what they're doing. I'm actually going to come back and make some of these darker, but I don't want to start out making them too dark because ink, just like watercolor, it just sort of stains the paper and it can't really be made that much lighter, although with ink it's far more permanent. So with watercolor you've got some liftability going on that you can do. With ink you can't do that at all. Versus gouache, where you can lift pretty much all of it right back. So, you know, it's different strokes for these different mediums, literally and figuratively. And the nice thing about being able to do this is that I'm just doing this with the pen. There isn't any other palette paint or anything else going on here. This bird has a blue back and a blue head and a blue tail, and the only way we can sort of really signal that is with some of this gray because there is no blue paint that we're using. We're not going to be using any colored inks, so I just wanted to be able to do that. And you can even do some wet here by putting the water in first and then stroking in that ink like that. We are looking to just block in the values here. If you change this photo of the scrub jay, this reference, to a black and white image, you'll see what I mean. And that's what I mean by you can just practice doing your grisaille with this too, because that's what you can see is the grayscale. And grisaille means the gray, which is why you're doing your gray value under painting when you're doing that. Bird back and all of the blue and the gray are actually the same value. So what's gray in the actual bird and the blue, when you change it to black and white, it all fades to the same light gray, lightish, towards the lighter side of the mid-gray. And so that's what I'm trying to block in here, is just that value, because I can see that that's what's going on here. And I don't want to make it any darker than that, otherwise it'll start to read like it's a black bird. You know, we have no color, we don't want to make it too dark. And now I'm going to just clarify some of this, doing some of the water-soluble ink with the other marker and a little bit of water in a brush. Once you come back with a wet brush, have some magic happen and release some of that pigment. You can make new lines, you can go over your old lines. For me, it's usually a little bit of both. My preferred way over doing the marker on a separate piece of paper. You can also pick it up while it's still wet and transfer it over to another area of the painting. And I have a few other examples of doing water-soluble ink stuff. A geisha, I've got a Rackham study, and I know that there's some darker color down here too where he's got some gray. When you're doing the water-soluble stuff, there's going to be some margin for spontaneity, so don't expect it to be just completely planned, because you can't really do that when you're working with water-soluble ink. Just like with wet and wet effects, some of it is going to be random. So as long as you plan for that and expect it, it should be fine. But if you want something that's totally planned and has no random anything at all, then don't use the water-soluble pen. You can get a similar effect with watercolor pencils as well. You can color with them dry and then work with water on top of it and you'll get the same kind of effect. Now this pen is a dye ink, and I'm assuming it's going to be the same thing for gel pens, and so it's not like a carbon black or an ivory black. So when you actually make this wet, it turns into green or blue or a little bit of red, depending on whatever dyes they use to mix it together to slight color effects on this. Even though you are only using black, you're going to end up with some of these dyes dispersing and turning into different colors. Okay, so now I'm just going to go around in different areas and perk up the actual value of different areas in this piece using this marker. But I like that little bloom that happens. That's a wet and wet watercolor bloom, but you can get that with ink like this. Basically what it ends up being is that I went and did my outline like I would normally do, and then instead of doing a watercolor wash, I'm doing wash just with the ink. So if you're having trouble analyzing it, just look at your photo in black and white by desaturating it on your phone or your computer, because it's really easy to do that. And you can also squint or put a red piece of plastic or acetate film on top of your photograph or your reference. Put the strokes down of just the water in the direction of his feather growth, because you don't want to have like the feathers pointing in the wrong direction. To spot stuff in the actual direction of the contours, whether it's the pen or whether it's the brush, always follow the direction of the fur or the feathers. Dye separating into a green and a red, because green and red make a black dye because they're complement, so you can see that that's what they mixed to make that. And sometimes you won't want it as dark there, and just go ahead and lift it up with a piece of scrap paper or your finger or a paper towel, and that'll make it lighter. I'm gonna go back and fix highlights now. And I think one of the things I want to do is add in a few sort of iridescent shimmer areas by putting in a few dots of that gel pen here and there. Stippling, that's where most of my stippling comes in, is in the white highlights. And this is just the edge of the bird bath here. And in this case, it's made out of some kind of, looks like terracotta or something like that. And this is where I use most of my scribble stroke, is where I know I'm going to end up wetting it later, because otherwise I'm not as much of a scribbler. Again, it has to be random, or you have to accept that it's going to be random, so let it do what it wants to do. Usually darker values distract, but I don't really mind, because at this point it's giving me some reference for people to see that this bird's not black. So that's not such a big deal in this case to point out that the values in other places might be darker, because this is just an ink piece. Okay, so for this bird here, which is a sort of more zoomed in look at the scrub jay, the California scrub jay's LinkedIn profile bio picture would look like, or if he was on a dollar bill or a coin. This is his like presidential portrait. I did a lot of feathery strokes here, all the smaller teeny feathers that he has all over his breast and everything, and on his face. And while I'm inking this bird up, I'm actually gonna discuss some of what I've researched for my scrub jay lecture for that class. So let's go ahead and talk about scrub jays a little bit. And this is the California scrub jay, or the Aphelocoma californica in Latin, which is its scientific classification. And it's from the kingdom Animalia, as you would expect. And its class is the Aves, which you would also expect, because that just means avian dinosaurs, what we call birds. And the order it's in is Passeriformes. And passerines include more than 50% of all birds, distinguished by 3 of their toes pointing forward and 1 back, which facilitates perching. And that's why this group is sometimes also called perching birds. And it's in the family Corvidae, and that's the global family of oscine, songbirds, passerine, perching birds, and it includes crows, ravens, rooks, jackdaws, jays, magpies, tree pies, chooks, and nutcrackers. And commonly it's called the crow family, or corvids. It's in the genus Aphelocoma, which we already mentioned in its scientific classification, and the species is specifically Aphelocoma californica because it's actually been divided up from a few of the other scrub jays in the past few years because it used to be lumped together with the woodhouse scrub jay and further back with the Florida scrub jay, but now it's separate as a separate California species. And Aphelocoma is a genus that includes only the New World jays that are occurring in North and South America. And they're all blue in color, basically the scrub jay and his relatives. And the name in Latin means simple hair because there are no striped or banded feathers like the kind that occur in the different bird blue jays. And because it's a perching passerine bird, the California scrub jay is an anisodactyl. And again, that means it has 3 toes pointing forward and 1 toe pointing back. You might recall the Carolina parakeet I painted was a zygodactyl because it had 2 of its toes pointing forward and 2 pointing back. So that parakeet was definitely a bit more of a rare weirdo in comparison to the more common anisodactyl birds. The range of the California scrub jay is western North America, all the way up from Washington, through California, down through Baja California and Mexico. It doesn't migrate, so you can enjoy seeing it all year round. And as I've mentioned, the California scrub jay is now separate from the woodhouse scrub jay and the Florida scrub jay, and it's also separate from the island scrub jay that only exists on Santa Cruz Island. The habitat of the California scrub jay is semi-desert scrub, oak woodlands, dry mountain canyons with pinyon pine and juniper forests, and these birds prefer scrubby, brushy areas. You can also find them living happily in suburban backyards. And as we're going to be drawing it today, it's important to know its appearance and physical traits as well. It's a medium-sized bird of 12 inches long, including its tail, and it has a 15-inch wingspan. And it only weighs an amazing 2.8 ounces, typical of all these birds because they're hollow-boned and have a lot of feathers. So even if you get a big bird, it's still going to be a light bird because it's got those hollow bird bones and those lightweight feathers. California scrub jays have a rich blue head, wings, and tail, and they have a gray-brown back and grayish underparts. And what I really love is the striking white eyebrows and also the whitish throat with that beautiful blue necklace coming around. They have no crest on their heads as adults. Remember, they're not blue jays. Like other corvids, male and female birds have the same coloring. The only way you can tell the difference is if they're sitting together, you'll see that the males are just slightly bigger. Juvenile scrub jays are fully gray, and they attain more and more blue as they mature into adults. We can compare them a bit to other varieties, and the California scrub jay versus the woodhouse scrub jay, for example. The California scrub jay has broad dark blue breast patches and more contrast between the upper breast sides and its brown back. So from further away, the woodhouse scrub jay is just going to look less blue and less contrast heavy than the California scrub jay. And there are also other species like pinyon jays, Mexican jays, Florida scrub jays, island scrub jays, and a few others, and they tend to be equally bright as the California scrub jay or less bright blue than the California scrub jay. Of course, there's going to be some variation within species, so you might end up seeing a brighter or duller bird from different areas. And one of the ones that stands out, of course, is the island scrub jay that's only found on Santa Cruz Island, an obvious brighter blue, and also has a thicker, longer bill. The California scrub jay, meanwhile, in comparison to the rest of the scrub jays, apart from the island scrub jay, has a heavier and more hooked bill for prying open acorns. So I also did a lot of the scribble stroke around his eye. You know, you want to have like that random texture that looks more natural. It doesn't have to exactly copy the photo, it just has to generally follow the direction of what you're seeing happening in the photo. You'll notice that when I'm doing the random texture for the scribble stroke around the eye and everything, it sort of goes from light to dark, the same way that you work in watercolor, because you can sort of scribble more widely and then keep scribbling over it, and eventually you'll fill in all the white spaces. So you can sort of gauge how much of that you want left over and how much of that you want to cover up. The call of the California scrub jay has been called shrill, sharp, harsh, and scratchy, so it's definitely not melodiously loved bird because it doesn't have a very beautiful voice. I can often hear it outside my cottage with a long repeated noise that's an inquisitive territorial display. And that's going to sound kind of like an eh. And there's also for disputes or when it's more upset, choop, 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 choop type clipped call. And then if there is a predator around or if it's more panicked or upset, it might have a faster like that kind of noise. So if you'll pardon my bad impersonations of that poor bird who's outside right now with a pistol. And also has quiet whispered chirps while it rests or contemplates or converses with its mate at a nest. You can check out, actually, I've put in my Patreon post a Scrub Jay Calls video, and that'll do a much better job than me letting you understand the vocalizations of this beautiful bird. Another way that it uses its calls is that a potential nest site can be shown by one mate to the other, by making a special type of flight over to that nest site while producing loud flight vocalizations while carrying nesting material. And then it makes wheezy vocalizations as it gets to the actual nest site. All of these birds have their own little language and different calls that mean different things that are sufficient for the lives that they lead, and it's very fascinating because you can actually teach yourself what these different calls mean if you hear them. And other birds and other animals are actually very aware of different calls from different animals, because if somebody is in danger or signaling alarm, it's in their interest to know. So I think it's kind of silly that so many of us don't try to learn more of the language of these animals just by observation. When it comes to the intelligence and behavior of this bird, he's almost unrivaled for how cool and interesting he is. He's a playful, curious, vocal, mischievous planner, and a super intelligent animal. He's totally a crafty, sneaky thief, but he makes no bones about being anything else, so he's what I call an honest thief. You can watch this bird moving around in really cute hops and lunges, look around really sharply and intelligently at everything, and really just drink everything in. It's highly intelligent as a corvid and one of the most intelligent of any animal that exists. The brain-to-body mass ratio of adult scrub jays rivals that of chimpanzees, and it's dwarfed only by that of humans, so it really is a very intelligent bird. Like many other corvids, the scrub jay caches food for later retrieval, and it remembers more than 200 scattered food caches via type and use among 30,000 different cache spots per season. In fact, its Miwok name is Planter of Oaks because scrub jays have sprouted more trees than Johnny Appleseed. And scrub jays know the type of food item and its rate of decay in each of their caches. And it's the only non-primate, non-dolphin shown to plan ahead for the future, which is called metacognition. And this was previously thought to be uniquely a human trait, so it's actually quite amazing that this animal has it too. And so it should go without saying that it has a highly accurate and complex memory. Accurate observational spatial memories allow it to steal food from other birds' caches, like other jays and woodpeckers. And when it's hiding its own food, it actually looks around and checks first that other jays or birds aren't watching. In this sneaking and stealing and recaching when it's alone, it conceives of others' perspectives. Again, something that only a very highly intelligent animal can do. Scrub jays usually forage in pairs, family groups, or small non-kin groups outside of the breeding season. Sometimes they can be in flocks, up to 30 birds during fall and winter, particularly birds who don't have their own territory yet, which are called floaters. As with chickens or a herd of goats, dominance hierarchy rules when these birds are in flocks. A breeding pair staunchly defends their territory year-round from other jays, and they do this by harsh calls and swooping at other birds, and also by some pecking if needed. California scrub jays also summon other jays to screech over the body of a dead jay if they find it. These funerals can last up to 30 minutes, and they also stay near that body for 1 to 2 days. And to me, again, this is a very touching and remarkable find, because only highly intelligent animals like humans or elephants are typically capable of displaying any kind of grief over a dead member of their species. The scrub jay is an omnivore and a forager, and in spring and summer it'll eat a variety of insects and also give loads of moth caterpillars to its fledglings, and it'll also have fruit and especially likes berries. In fall and winter it switches to mostly nuts and seeds, especially acorns, and it'll also eat small animals like lizards, frogs, eggs, nestling birds, sometimes shadowing adult birds to find their nests. It's also been observed picking parasites like ticks off the backs of mule deer. It enjoys grass seeds, sunflower seeds, and peanuts at feeders, also cultivated corn, almonds, walnuts, and cherries. And the California scrub jay has a specially developed stout bill to hammer at an acorn hull while it's holding it between its feet, and once it splits open the shell, it has a hooked upper mandible to pry open and pluck out that acorn meat. And scrub jays can become tame and eat from bird feeders, and I have evidence of this because I actually have a bird feeder hanging outside my window, and this is one I finally switched to after the non-squirrel safe bird feeder in the tree outside the cottage failed, and I have this one now that the squirrels haven't been able to get to. I get 2 scrub jays and also another smaller bird, and they all visit daily for the past few weeks, and I'm thrilled to look up and watch my bird TV anytime they visit. And it's also very fascinating to me that both of the scrub jays have different behavior patterns, so I can tell the difference between them because of their behavior. That's the nice thing about having a bird feeder attached to your window, is that you sort of get to see them visit you several times a day, but you don't sort of stop them from doing what they really want to do the rest of their time, which is fly about in the wild. I'm going to come back and do some water-soluble touches on here, and again I'm going to put in some areas where I can see there's the darkest value areas on the bird. And this is just a quick journal piece. You can get a lot more precious and a lot more detailed if you're working on a watercolor piece or a gouache piece or even an ink and wash piece like I typically do. But this is just a different kind of beast, and it's fun in its own different way, which is it's not as formal as some of those other ones, but it's still a lot of fun. Scrub jays have that little blue necklace that happens here around the whitish throat area, so even though this is not in color, I am trying to make sure that we understand that he's got this darker feather pattern around his neck area. And you can totally leave this as a piece where you're not doing the runny ink effects, but I think it just elevates a piece from the line drawing is what I'm looking to do here. Nest predators of the scrub jay include raccoons, weasels, skunks, squirrels, king snakes, rattlesnakes, gopher snakes, crows, magpies, and other jays. And predators of adults and fledglings include bobcats, house cats, ravens, and great horned owls, and other predatory raptor-type birds. And recently, the West Nile virus has also been affecting the scrub jay population in the Central Valley, but I'm hoping it's something that's controllable. These birds usually mate for several years, though about 1/10 of pairs do split up every year. A mated pair will often feed each other, especially during breeding season. When it comes to reproduction, the nest site can be chosen by either sex, and the nest is built by both sexes. And the nest consists of an outer basket of twigs, inner finer area that has animal hair and more fine strands of plant fibers. Nests take around 10 days to build, are a cup-style nest, and the inner part is about 6 inches in diameter, and the outer part nest platform can be up to 23 inches. And it's positioned about 6 to 14 feet from the ground, so it's not very high. In fact, we did have a nest that we saw in a kumquat tree that we have outside the cottage that was only about 6 or 7 feet high, and the nests are well hidden among dense foliage and branches. Only the female incubates the eggs, and the mate will often bring her food as she sits on them. These birds will have 1 to 5 eggs in a clutch, and up to 2 clutches annually, especially if the first clutch fails. And in the case of the birds that we had nesting here, first clutch did fail, and I'm assuming that they're going to go try to build another nest someplace else. And that's because we had so many weird rains going on in California this year. The embryos inside of them died after there was a 3 or 4 day of like huge amounts of really cold and rain that happened suddenly. So I think that's why that clutch failed. I'm not 100% sure, but they definitely didn't hatch. The incubation period is between 17 to 19 days, and fledglings are born naked, blind, and helpless. And the brooding period is 16 to 26 days. That's another way you can calculate how long you should be staying away from the nest if you do see somebody building a nest, because you really don't want to disturb a bird that's nesting because it might abandon its nest. And so don't take photos, don't go over there and bother it. Try to leave it alone while it's incubating and also during the brooding period. So that should be over in about 2 months total. And both sexes feed the fledglings, and these young birds will stay with their parents for at least 5 months. Okay, so I'm going to do my nest and eggs last. I'm doing the outline for them. It doesn't really matter if it's even or not because there's going to be a lot of nest shadows around it, so I'm not being really precious and careful the way that I usually am when I'm inking a circle or an oval, because it really doesn't matter if there's going to be twigs all around it. The splotches on there are directional splotches, so don't just put them on there horizontally or vertically. It'll make it look totally flat or just really weird and skewed. You're going to want to put them on so that they're following the direction, the contours, the curves of the actual egg. So what I've done is actually drew in some of those contour lines lightly in pencil across and around the egg in some places, so when I'm putting in the splotches I have a little bit of a guideline there. Don't make them perfect dots. In fact, if they're more imperfect, the more natural they'll look, because you can see that they're actually very splotchy and mottled, and they're not like perfect polka dots or anything like that, so that's not a good idea. It's going to make them again look not very natural. Also, the eggs are the focal point, so you can draw as little or as much of the nest as you desire. If it's something that really makes you excited, then draw a whole lot of it. If you don't want to draw a whole lot of it, then you can just draw a little bit and just apply some of the darker shadow once you get your water-soluble ink wet. It'll give you that automatic dark look to the actual nest part of it. I make jewelry as well, so I've actually done these really cool sterling silver nests with pearl eggs in them. Those are the funnest nests that I ever made. I made like, I think, several different necklaces with different kinds of nests and different kinds of pearls that are different colored eggs inside of them. So that's another way to do a nest is, actually 3D. When you weave it with a little bit of that silver wire, it's actually so much more fun. The nest comes in this cup basket shape that is propped amongst these dense branches and leaves, and so from the side it'll look like a large cup, and there's going to be a platform that is the more coarser twigs and branches that's propped up against the leaves and branches of the tree, and then the inside lining is going to be finer plant matter, and it's going to be some animal hair or whatever they can find to make it softer, so when the chicks hatch they have a softer space to be. And they have really pretty eggs, actually, and they are pale green with mottled olive, and also they can come in a pale gray spotted with a brown. And the lifespan of these birds is 9 years on average, and they can get to 15 years or so if they don't die from some kind of sickness or a predator. And I'm going to come in and pop in the shadows, and I'm going to just use a little bit of the marker ink dabbed onto my paintbrush, and you can do that directly off the marker or color your marker onto a piece of wax paper. Get a little bit of that marker ink onto your brush and give yourself a little light shadow. I didn't want it to be very dark. Eggs are a light, beautiful sort of like tealy blue color, so I don't want them to show up as super dark in this ink. I want the nest to look darker than the egg, so a very light shadow there. Just enough to make it look like it's a little bit of a curved, rounded, oval form there. And the oldest scrub jay that was documented in captivity was named Aaron, and he lived to be a hardy 19.5 years. In my Patreon post, I also have a few videos that I saw on YouTube that I've included as link-throughs of a scrub jay mom nesting, and also the parents feeding their hatched chicks, and also older chicks with the parents there. So somebody filmed some amazing footage, so you should go definitely check that out. If you want to attract California scrub jays to your yard, make sure you have an inviting nature space with low, dense, shrubby trees. And if you have oak trees with acorns, and if you're living in the coastal area from Washington down to Baja, California, then you probably already have them around. It's a common non-threatened bird currently, and if you're living in the appropriate range, then you'll probably see some around. Even if you have some flowers and potted plants, you can still attract some of these scrub jays, especially if you put out a bird feeder that has peanuts and sunflower seeds or peanut suet patties. And try to aim for something that's squirrel safe and also crow resistant as a feeder. Otherwise, medium birds like the scrub jay and other smaller birds are just going to be scared off by more aggressive starlings and crows, or have no food left for them to find because the squirrels will have eaten it all. And once you've done all of that, then just be patient and then be prepared for super adorable and intelligent, noisy, vocal, and curious bird visitors. Well, wizards, I hope you enjoyed learning about the spectacular California scrub jay and also doing some ink journaling featuring this magnificent bird. Please like, comment, and check out my website dashboard for easy access to all my online platform links on a single page to support my art creation and instruction. Thanks for parking your brushes here, and wishing you all fantastical inking adventures.